I'm so excited to be here because, do you guys feel it? This is such an amazing and exciting time in our sector. And you guys are on the leading edge here at GHTC, so it's super exciting. And it's a fantastic moment for me, actually, to be here today as I am closing a chapter on my journey. I'm going to give you my background and then tell you how I got here and all these people, why all these people are here. So I came to academia through an 18-year career in what I like to call rapid response logistics. I was 7 years in the Air Force Special Ops doing logistics, getting airplanes out of town. And then I went into the humanitarian sector and I spent 11 years there as a humanitarian logistician. And this is really more where my heart was in this space, and also to see the really relevant need for systems, not just technological systems, but effective systems for making humanitarian aid happen. My 10+ years, I worked for the UN World Food Program. I worked for U.S. Agency for International Development, Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance. They are the U.S. government's lead agency arm for humanitarian response. I was on their DART teams, their disaster assistance response teams. I deployed to Liberia, to the tsunami, to Sudan, delivering the U.S. contributions to those disasters. I worked for World Vision International and was their head of logistics preparedness, and was their head of logistics post Pakistan earthquake in Pakistan. So that's a little my background and where I'm coming from, and my hopes of contributing to this space of saving lives and bringing technology to bear on that. So in those years that I worked as a humanitarian logistician, I spent a lot of time working with vendors. So logistics is a super interesting role in the humanitarian space because we interact probably more than anyone else with vendors on a regular basis because we do the procurement. We buy those things that people are creating, that NGOs are using with communities or providing for communities. We particularly in my days with USAID, we funded a lot of those projects. And particularly, I want to talk about information management systems because I like to tell people when I speak at classes and stuff that logistics is really information flows. Like moving the stuff's the easiest part. It's the information flow that's the challenge, and a lot of it is about having good, effective technology systems for doing that and social connections for doing that. So we received hundreds and hundreds of products and projects and systems and people with the great next thing for communities in disaster settings, for NGOs serving those communities. And I have to tell you that 9 out of 10 times they weren't the next greatest thing. And so, but they come in and in information management in particular, I'm going to talk about because we spent so much money on information management, and it's a topic on the tracks here, and I interact a lot with it. I was always that subject matter expert where the technology comes in the door, and we have the customization phase, and then we have the implementation phase, and then we have with a pilot, and then it doesn't work, and then we customize it again, and then we try and implement it again. And this is a scenario that happens over and over again in information management, to the point that it's really, for those of us who work in this space, know it's really about a 3-year cycle before folks realize there's something not working. And so the end product, with everybody's good intention, with people who really had great solutions and had used it in other spaces, for people who really wanted to bring technology to bear, the solutions weren't faster, cheaper, and better. They were more expensive. They were making things slower. They weren't improving. So a lot of people are asking, I was frustrated and disappointed. We have this wonderful group of people with amazing talent and resources and skills who really want to come and create and design and make wonderful technology to benefit humanity. And we have this other wonderful group of humanitarian organizations who are doing that work on the ground and need the technology and want technology in that space. And we would come together even for years at a time and still not end up with a solution. And so the question is, why weren't we creating helpful technology? It doesn't make sense, right? When all the goodwill is there and all the right skills are there and all the people who care are there. And a lot of people are asking that question and have been asking that question. So I go back to school. I had the joy of meeting Mark Haselkorn, who helped us with an information management project at World Vision International. And 4 years later, I did a big research project with Red Cross. We have a Red Cross person here on what is effective humanitarian work.
Robin comes back to school, walks in, tells her story that you're hearing, and immediately gets a very prestigious National Science Foundation graduate research fellowship to fund her to do what she does. So,
thank you. Okay, so, but I'm not the only one asking these questions, right? We have a lot of great minds. Everybody in here is asking those questions, and but I come to this key innovation challenge, which I bring you all here today because this is a community that cares about that, is at the Global Humanitarian Technology Conference, the challenge is, how do we get humanitarian into the technology? And what I mean by that is, how do we create and design technology, whether it's an information system or a product or what have you, for a work system and context that's not beholden to our traditional values that we were given when we learned how to create technology. You're like, what? What I mean is, humanitarians in their work are beholden to a different definition of effectiveness. You know, our traditional definitions of effectiveness have to do with sort of having the perfect right solution. And effectiveness in the humanitarian context has to do with human rights laws and humanitarian law, like self-determination, that we're not violating this human right that we say is a law, that people get to choose what happens to them in these situations and have a say in what care they receive. Or they're beholden to the ICRC and NGOs Code of Conduct for Disaster Relief. There's 10 principles. If you're not familiar with it, look it up. It's very easy to Google. That says, for example, will include those beneficiaries in the decision-making of their care and deciding how their care is implemented. And humanitarian principles, which I know a couple interactive sessions got to talk about yesterday, of neutrality, impartiality, humanity. Is technology neutral? I think those of us who design it know that it's not. But when we're designing and when we're being raised as technologists and learning our skills and then going into the field and designing things, are we thinking about that? Are we thinking about, will this design somehow impact human rights law, someone's human rights? Will this impact the ICRC Code of Conduct? Will this make whoever is using this technology accountable to those laws? Because these are the things that equal effectiveness in the humanitarian space. It's not always something you can count, but it's something that will stop any technology dead in the water if it isn't making it a better result in this area. So, until we do that, until we're thinking about how do we design humanitarian values and consider those in our design of technology, we're going to continue to fail to create technologies that are as effective as they can be at saving lives. And this is what I'm excited about, because we at Global Humanitarian Technology Conference have created a space where that conversation can start, because we have to start there. We have to have our technologists knowing what is effective work in the humanitarian workspace for them to be creating technology that's going to help them to be better and more effective in that model of working. And so this moment is fantastic for me because I'm closing up my time as a PhD student with Mark, and I get to see this conversation so alive and well here. And I get to see people coming together And I get to bring practitioners who often aren't incentivized to come to these conferences, because like I said, we get 100, emails a week from vendors and people with great engineering ideas. And so we're not incentivized to come to these to hear yet another idea or technology that somebody thinks is great, but somebody hasn't actually come to understand that the humanitarian part is what we're accountable to. So, GHTC, I just want to talk about how proud I am to be a part of this conference, and especially this year, and some of the amazing things they've done to really make that space alive and viable. We changed our review process this year to include practitioners in the review process of the papers, so that our research is not only technology and engineering ideas that work, but they're also, and credible and valid in that sense, but they're also credible and valid in the sense that they work in the right context. They're applicable, they're appropriate, they follow humanitarian values. A second thing we're doing is those interactive sessions, which we had a great response from, where actually you have folks sitting together and saying, this is what this means to me, and this is what this means to me, and what amazing, better results are we going to have in our research that we have these two communities talking to each other and creating that space for it. And then finally, this panel, where I went out and strong-armed all my favorite practitioners to come and talk to you. There's so many more out there, but these are some of the best who are out there and can talk in this space where we need to be teaching each other and we need to be learning each other's languages. And they have some experience in the technology and the humanitarian space. And so I'm really excited to hear what they have to say today about the future of humanitarian technology. Yeah.
So we've got a really valuable 55 minutes here, and my job is just, my job is just to facilitate and help us squeeze as much as we can out of this community, these representatives of the humanitarian community that we have here. Can we go to the next slide? I do it. I'm sorry. There you go. Okay. I do need to mention, when you work with professional practitioners, that something could happen in the world and your whole panel would be done. Forget it, they wouldn't show up tomorrow. We do have had a co-organizer, Ian O'Donnell of the Red Cross Global Disaster Preparedness Group. Is the mic working? Anyway, who was supposed to be on this panel, who helped organize it, but is in Geneva right now. I got called away, and that's going to be part of the deal when you work with this community. Keep going. Keep going. I'm going to, as the very first, so let's think of that sprint we were just talking about. Designers, developers, builders, community of practitioners. That's the three groups that have to do that sprint. We design, we build it, we put it in front of them. This is a design activity. It's not with putting prototypes in front of them. We're putting them on the design team. They need to create their future information sharing environment. And we need to hear from them what we need to know in order to build and design and keep working with them as we iterate towards that correct thing. So first thing I want to do, let's go down the, you have their names up there, but let's go run down the panel, and if we could get, 3 minutes, Lorenzo, start it off about yourself, what your experience is, and who you are.
Hi, very good morning to everyone. My name is Lorenzo. I work for the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies in the Continental Office for the Americas region, which is based in Panama. I've been working in the humanitarian sector for over 15 years now, in most of the major crises in Europe, Middle East, Asia, Africa, and now in the Americas. And currently, I've been working primarily in emergency relief and recovery operations for many years, and in the recent times, after heading our Haiti earthquake operation, which was the biggest single country operation that the Red Cross has had in recent times, and now in charge of the Learning and Innovation Unit. And I guess the reason why I'm here is to try and learn from you. That's the very selfish objective that I had when I was invited to come here. And the second one is probably to try and give you some ideas on what we need as community practitioners to get the best out of that cycle that Mark was referring to, in which we try to present our challenges that we face in the humanitarian world and the ideas that you have from the innovation and technology industry.
My name's Miriam Orcutt. I'm a medical doctor. I'm based in Oxford with the Humanitarian Innovation Project, which is under the Refugee Studies Centre, Department of International Development. But I focus on medical humanitarian innovation and looking really at how can we better implement, from a practitioner perspective, innovations on the ground which are going to be useful, effective, and not do harm to patients. It is a really exciting field, and I also am learning a lot at this conference, and a lot about potential collaboration and just really discussion between different groups. I think that from my personal background, being sort of a practitioner, a medical practitioner, plus doing quite a lot of global health and humanitarian work, sometimes it can be easy to get sort of stuck in one's own silo and not to talk to other people with expertise who have, you know, more than enough to offer. And I really want to break down those barriers. So today, hopefully, by giving some medical and health technology examples, I can open that discussion for medical innovation in the field.
Good morning, my name is Sian Platt. I work for Plan International, and I live and work in Bangladesh. I live in Dhaka. I feel like I'm the wild card, to be honest, on this panel. I think I come very much from the, if you like, more of the frontline perspective. Plan is a child rights focused NGO, and I've worked in this sector for more than 15 years, and I've worked in relief contexts, mostly natural disasters, and I've worked in development. And so yeah, I was perhaps the random choice. I very much thank Robin for persuading me to come, because I said I don't know anything about, you know, engineers and technology. And she said, no, you should come. And I'm very glad that I did come, because I realized that, as all the panelists have just said, there is a need to talk to each other and to understand your reality, but very much to explain mine and the practicalities of implementing some of your great ideas and helping you design better ones. So I'm really excited to talk to you all. Maybe one other piece of context, I've worked mostly in Asia, but I've probably now worked in nearly every continent. So I have some experience and understanding of the challenges of also bringing technologies and wanting to implement them in more than one kind of location, and the challenges of adapting to that.
Hi, I'm Dan McClure. I'm from Thoughtworks, and I thought I was the random choice. I basically work in a strange space. It's the space between practitioners and between the organizations that want to do innovation. And my real focus is on how innovation processes are broken and how that needs to be fixed. And so really, how do we reinvent invention is my primary focus within the humanitarian sector.
Awesome. What a group. Thank you, Robin, for bringing them together. So, we've got about 50 minutes, and I definitely want to leave at least 10 of that for you guys to come in. So we've got 3 questions. Basically, what's working, what exists that excites these people, or what promise do they see, or maybe not? What are the ingredients of those things that are working? What's the secret sauce? What distinguishes the things that are working? And then finally, what does that tell us about how we move forward into the future? So, looks like we've got, you know, we can do about 12 plus minutes on each of these, 4 minutes each of you. So that our sprints will be about 4-minute sprints on each question from each of you. So let's continue the order. I like the way we're going. Lorenzo, what's going on out there that you think's good? What's exciting? Oh, use it. Oh, I see. So
Thank you. No, it's okay. People.
Oh, we're good. Okay.
Thanks, Mark. Maybe before the what works, I have a question. Another question that I posed in here is that why do we need to do it? Because, I mean, it has been said a couple of times yesterday, I heard, but it is important to particularly to the engineering industry and the technologists to understand that the why is because as humanitarian practitioners we can't continue doing the business the way we did it before. It doesn't work. It's not effective any longer. And it is not because the world is changed and the humanitarian landscape is changed. The ecosystem is changed dramatically in the last 20 years, but even in the last 10 years. I mean, you know, I was counting around the humanitarian assistance has tripled in the last 10 years or so, and yet we are probably less effective than what we were before. And there are many different reasons for that. But what it's true is that we need to rethink the model that we worked on, where technology has a critical place to play, a critical role to play, but it's not necessarily the only way. And I think it's important, it was mentioned yesterday a couple of times, innovation is not just about technology. And I think it's important again to re-emphasize that we have to look at both aspects, technology, yes, but also processes and the socio-dynamics of where technology is introduced. And in the work that we do in the Red Cross, there are elements that have to be considered in that ecosystem that change. I mean, there are issues that were mentioned yesterday about migration trends that dramatically change the way we do business. We're talking about urbanization, and that's not something that as a Red Cross we are very good at. And I would say most of the organizations are not very familiar with dealing humanitarian crisis in urban settings. We are talking about the complexity of the conflicts we are facing from the and the challenges that, you know, this is not like before. We used to have two fighting factions, and it was a little bit easier to understand who is on one side, who is on the other. This has changed. There are many different elements that are now playing, many different actors are now playing into that war game, and we need to understand those. But this is not just about the traditional conflict situation. The Red Cross is facing enormous challenges with increasing levels of violence, and primarily I would say in the context of Central and South America, having the top 10 most violent cities in the world. Actually, I have to be honest, also together with some of the cities in the US as well. And that's a challenge that the Red Cross is facing, and it's facing in Central and South America, but it's also facing as American Red Cross here in the US. And we need to understand that environment to see what are what is working well and what is not working well. But the bottom line is that there is a need, and the why is clear. We need to change to be more effective.
So Lorenzo, just for a check, in about 90 seconds, I'm going to stop you.
Yeah, okay. Now, you know, I want to give that message, what's working well. I mean, in the afternoon, I'm going to talk about ODK, for instance, which I think has been one of the most successful introductions of technology into the way we do business. So I will not talk about ODK now, but I'm going to give you another example of a technology that was introduced and has been extraordinarily successful, and it's the cash transfer program using prepaid Visa cards. It's a partnership that the Red Cross is having with Visa, and is now allowing us to distribute prepaid Visa cards. And it's thought from the preparedness point of view, meaning we are ready to distribute up to 20,000 families on 24 hours, prepaid cards, in 33 out of the 35 countries that we have in America. That's innovative. And it's not necessarily about the technology itself, because the technology exists. Visa was existing before we did. What we did, we partnered with them to understand, for them to understand what is the dynamics of the response situation that we face, for them to help us with one with one technology that was functioning in the private sector and adapt that to the context of a humanitarian crisis. And I just want to give that example because it is technology well applied to a problem that exists before. And
so we'll come back to the let's keep that one in mind. Why are they distributing whatever it was, 50,000 Visa cards? What is it about that gives it some special sauce that you care enough to do that? So we'll come back to that one the next time around. Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
So I'd like to talk about what is working from the medical innovation or medical technology perspective. And there's plenty of examples I could use, but given him I only have 4 minutes, I'm going to pick one. So I'd like to talk to you about something that is used perhaps more in across countrywide settings at the moment, maybe not so far used in humanitarian crises or disaster settings, but has a lot of potential. And this is, there's a system called a clinical decision support system. In clinical medicine, we have an increasing evidence-based method of working. So we have research which we collate, and according to best research, best practice is determined, and we have protocols which might determine what we do with, say, a febrile child. And there's a international protocol by the World Health Organization called IMCA, which is basically the management for childhood diseases for children with fevers. This has been in the developing world and has been used to treat ill children since the 1990s. However, just recently, there have been increasingly investigations into how we can make the protocols electronic. And I'd like to take you for a moment to Burkina Faso, where there is a very high childhood mortality rate, and where 1 in 6 children die before the age of 5. A lot of these deaths are preventable deaths. They might be from infectious diseases, from diarrheal diseases, from upper respiratory tract infections. And a lot of the issues with the deaths is that we can prevent these through giving access to medical care, which might be there or might not be there. So we have 2 issues. One is the system in which these healthcare professionals are working, and second thing is maybe the information that they are being given. So there was a trial, and it's still ongoing now, to see how we can put a basic clinical protocol for childhood diseases for feverish children onto a tablet. They'd found previously that the paper version of the World Health Organization guidelines was being used by only about 8%, in 8% of childhood consultations. And so a very simple protocol was developed and put onto a tablet and was distributed in 2 provinces in Burkina Faso in collaboration with a lot of the existing health structures and with the Ministry of Health as well. And what was actually found was that childhood mortality rates reduced in those 2 provinces. I won't go into all of the what are the secrets of this example, but basically this was now being implemented across the whole of Burkina Faso. And I would just like to say, what is working? Something that's simple, that's already existing, so existing information that's been adapted into a certain context, and that is community-based. So I'll talk more about that in the second question. But these protocols were implemented with the local communities, with the local community healthcare workers, and in collaboration, so it was an appropriate technology. So probably my 3 keywords would be the simplicity, appropriate, and adaptable to the environment. But I'll go into that a bit more
Great.
after.
So we've got the Visa project, we've got the Access to Healthcare project in Burkina Faso. How about you?
So,
Sean?
yeah, me.
Yeah.
So, I just wanted to put one precursor as well, and not take too long, but just to say that I agree that technology is already there where we work. It's not something we're bringing in, it's already there. And one of the things I didn't mention is I'm actually kind of my technical area would actually be child protection. So often I hear people say, oh, the internet's an amazing thing. From a child protection point of view, technology is morally neutral, but the impact is not. The internet is a terrible thing. It has brought pedophiles much closer to their prey. It has facilitated all kinds of, unfortunately, terrible things. So when we also enter into the place that technology already is, we really do need to think about technology is neutral, or the tool is neutral, but the impact is not. So I'm going to talk about a good use of technology linked to issues of sexual reproductive health. So my organization works with adolescent sexual reproductive health in Bangladesh. It's a very critical issue because, like practically every country in the world, nobody wants to talk about sex with adolescents, but they do think about it. If this is a surprise to you, you may not be a parent of a teenager. So we have a project that covers a whole bunch of other activities, but I'm just going to tell you about the helpline, because it's very simple. We have set up a helpline. It's still new, so it's still yet to be proven the full impact. But young people can ring up on their mobile phones or landline and call a counsellor and ask them questions about sexual reproductive health that they're not able to ask anybody in their context. And there are other kind of uses of simple technologies to help that. So obviously when you get the call, you log the call, and you collect basic monitoring and evaluation information, which allows us to draw conclusions and have an evidence base, which will allow us to try and persuade the government to allocate resources to this vital area, because nobody wants to talk about sex to adolescents, so there isn't a problem, right? And also, we don't know what young people really don't know. So this is a way of finding out, and it's anonymous, so it's easier for them to be honest. Anytime you try and ask people questions about sex in any country in the world, they lie. They also lie depending on which gender they are. And so we can use these questions that people are asking us in real time, and we then link that to radio programs that we're making, where we have question and answer sessions with experts or with other young people, and we put the radio program is influenced by whatever the questions are being asked online at that time. We do actually have also web-based applications that we're using, and we have like games and questions and answers and things that you can do online as well. But though there is internet use in Bangladesh, that would still be a little bit low. I'll just point out one problem that we have is I suspect that it will be proven by the data, but there's probably a gender bias about access to the phone to ask the question. So I will wait and see, but it's probably likely that boys more than girls will be able to access phones. But I wouldn't prejudge that, because young people are super resourceful.
Excellent. So now we've added linking young folks to counselors in Bangladesh. Dan?
All right. I find an interesting thing when we look at what works. There seems to be sort of a bimodal model here. So you hear some very high-profile successes like crisis mappers, the adoption of mobile phones, leapfrogging the telecom technologies in Africa, or microfinancing. And those stories seem almost ludicrous in their ambition. They're so big. And then there's a number of stories that sort of conform to it's simple, it fit in, and it, slotted into an existing ecosystem, and those seem to work too. What's missing is the center area of the space, of the thing that's a little bit bigger change, a little bit more ambitious, and those seem to be really troubled. And this really was one of the things that made me curious about the whole innovation space in the humanitarian sector, because why should the middle-sized dream have so much trouble? And the analogy that I've come to use now is one around building a home and doing home improvements. So if you're going to change the color of the drapes, you might still have to get your spouse's approval. It costs a little bit of money, you've got to have it done, but it fits into the way the home is currently used. The new brown drapes aren't going to be any different to use than the green drapes, and as a result, it's a fairly smooth adoption. And so those incremental changes go fairly smoothly. If you want to do a home improvement that involves building a mansion on a greenfield piece of land, while that's a much bigger effort, it's also something you can kind of do on your own time. You can figure out what you're going to do. You've got open land. You can build everything from scratch exactly how you want it. That's the crisis mappers. That's the folks that essentially sprung out of nowhere and created a brand new space. And if you read the story of crisis mappers, they responded within weeks to an unexpected challenge. And they basically came out of nowhere. They built an entire new ecosystem on greenfield. Now imagine you've got a house full of people grandma, 9 kids, 7 dogs, whatever, and you try to move the bathrooms. That involves tearing out all the plumbing, telling people that they don't get to use the bathroom for 3 or 4 weeks. You've got to deal with existing load-bearing walls and all of those sorts of things. That project is fraught with danger, even though it's a smaller project than building the new home. So what I've seen work are big greenfield dreams where you can create your own ecosystem, small things that fit into an existing ecosystem and replace an existing piece of functionality. The ones that are troubled and need special attention are when you try to move the toilets.
That's great, Dan.
Let me think about that, and I'll do that in my next.
There you go. So now, it'd be nice, especially in the first 3 cases, to build off your example, but the goal here is to generalize, as Dan has done, and try to tweak out what are the characteristics, what are the features, what's the nature of the ones that you feel are successful. Lorenzo, you're up first. Tell us more about Visa. Why are you doing that?
The Visa project, why do we think it is a success? It is a success because it starts from the bottom, in the sense that the cash transfer program, which is basically that idea that the people know what they need. It's not that the humanitarians, we know what they need, right? So in a situation in which the markets are stable, even after a disaster. I can take the example. I mean, we have a colleague here, Alberto, is being with us. He had to leave to Honduras today, but he's been working all these nights, uploading and approving cards for distribution that is happening now in Grenada. I don't know if you're familiar with, but there was a big storm passing by 2 weeks ago, and now we are in the distribution phase. That the markets are stable. People knew, and people know. And the same as you and I, what we need. We don't have to tell them what they need, whether you need a hygiene kit. People know. So that's sort of the first idea, that we start from the bottom and say people know what they need. In this case, they need cash, so they can reactivate their livelihoods and lives, and they know what they have to buy to do that. So starting from that point. So this is not new. The theory is there. What we needed is the application of technology to make sure, A, that we are ready, and we can do that faster and in a more effective way that we did it before. I mean, cash is only relevant. You're able to do it very quickly after the disaster. After, it makes no sense. We failed before, and I think it's important. Somebody was saying, our UNICEF colleague was saying that she's not going to tell us about the number of failures that we have. We have many of them, right? We tried to implement cash transfer programming with American Red Cross in Haiti after the earthquake, and the dynamics of that ecosystem are so complex that in dealing with the government authorities, by the time we were ready to distribute, it made no sense. I mean, we were providing support to communities in Haiti, more than 1 million people living in IDP, in displaced camps within Port-au-Prince. By the time we wanted to do it, the government said, no, it's too late. So what we identified that as a gap, and say how we can make sure that in the next disaster, we are able to operate within 48 hours. So we met, but we have the expertise, as we mentioned before. So what we need to do is to partner with those that have the technology, and that was we identified that with Visa. We sat down with them and said we need a system that will allow us to do that in 48 hours. So we need the technology, but the needs are there and are clearly discussed with the community. What they want is cash. So I think that would be probably that sort of 2 elements that I would bring to the table. First of all, that is human-centered in the sense that is discussed with the communities and it's clear. And the second element is that we, as humanitarians, and that was mentioned by our UNICEF colleague, we are not necessarily experts in technology, but what we need to make sure is that we partner with those that are really experts on technology and bring the two together. And I think that would probably be the 2 elements that I would.
Those are great. Just to emphasize them, that we're, rather than delivering the logistics goods, we're giving, as long as the markets are there and the availability is there, we're We have a quick way to deliver a way they can choose what they want. They know better than we do. So we're empowering the community, important feature, and the speed aspect, of course, I think is another one that's great. So let's keep those in mind and move on.
So I'd just like to continue with the same example I was using before. So with this protocol, you have, say, a non-medically trained or with very minimal medical training community healthcare worker who may have a sick child in front of them with a fever. They then analyze a couple of different parameters: respiratory rate, heart rate, any respiratory distress, and how high the fever is as well. And according to these different parameters, they can then have a very simple, like sort of a flow chart, a very simple algorithm for what they should be doing. So if respiratory rate is high, heart rate is high, temperature is high, there's any respiratory depression, they will have an actionable point. So they'll have to give antibiotics and refer to nearest healthcare facility immediately. So this is just to demonstrate, how does this work? Now what they actually found was that for some reason, the electronic version of these protocols on a simple algorithm using a tablet was working, or a computer was working much more effectively. And there were a couple of different aspects to why was this working more effectively and why were we able to reduce mortality rates in children in Burkina Faso with this tool. It was partly the tool itself, that it was actually much easier to go through and understand and use and demonstrate to the healthcare worker as well as the patient exactly what should be done. So it's literally press and up come the other options and exactly what the action should be, rather than going through a 20-page paper protocol. But also it was how this was implemented. So there were various stages, including community consultation, including training of the healthcare professionals in the regions. And not only that, but after they implemented this new tool, new technology, there was then feedback mechanisms. So they went back and said, how is this working? What are the good aspects of this tool? What are the things that we're finding more difficult? And they changed their tool, and they changed the way they were doing their training according to that. So there was a constant feedback loop and a constant way of saying what can we do to improve the efficiency of this tool. So I think probably if I was going to generalize and say what were the sort of secret ingredients from something, really, really simple example, I would say that it needs to be appropriate. So it was something that was appropriate for the community and the population that they were working with. There was a needs assessment, there was discussion with the community, there was discussion with the people who are going to be using this tool, and there was feedback with that information. And then secondly, the tool was very much integrated into existing structures. So it wasn't just something that, okay, well, we think this will reduce mortality rates. It's actually, they already knew about this, most healthcare workers knew about this guideline for feverish children, hadn't necessarily used it, but they were then given something that improved their interaction with this existing health guideline. So it was something that was adapted into the environment and the health system they were working in.
Thank you. So awesome. When you field the technology, that is not the end of the design development process. That's just the beginning of another phase. You don't finish your thing, hand it off, and you're done with it. No way. Great lesson. Thanks. Sean.
Yeah, I think Miriam just laid out a few I agree with all those principles, and maybe just try and add a few more. First one, back to the same example, why I think the jury's still out how successful it is, but so far we had 170 calls and we'd opened it for a week, this helpline. So I think it's doing something. It's because it meets a need, no? I want to ask a question of somebody as an adolescent. I don't want to ask somebody straight face-to-face because I'm embarrassed or nervous, or I don't know if you're going to judge me. So the technology fills the gap that they need. From a management point of view, this is what I do. I write and design and help implement projects. It's flexible. There's a menu of different things that I described of different technologies. So we could add in new responses. We could use complicated technologies, simple technologies, and we can just fit them in. It's practical. This is a big one for me. I had to, if I, as the person using the technology, I had to do all these steps anyway. It's economical of my time. I have to log the call. I have to know if the call's appropriate and write that down. Is the person asking a question, or are they want to talk dirty? So, and also, does the technology help me disengage the person who called for a wrong purpose? So, and logging that. So, are we getting the right response to the feedback cycle? I get an evidence base quite quickly. My M&E doesn't involve a lot more extra work, and I can real-time adapt my interventions and improve them. And so, also, I meet technology that kind of meets all the different stakeholders' needs in one go. I don't have to do lots of different hacks and workarounds and fiddly bits of paperwork to make all of the different stakeholders get to participate in that technology. And I'll come back later, but I just want to say the mobile phone cash transfer is a huge area also where we could be doing much more creative things. So I think that applies to many different countries, certainly in Bangladesh, not just the emergency response, but just day-to-day life. People are using mobile phones, but there may be all sorts of opportunities to use them in a much more effective way to reduce all those steps, to be practical.
Awesome. So not only agency of the community, but multiple stakeholders, co-development with people, which also addresses adoption issues because you're involving the adopters in from the beginning. All kinds of wonderful lessons, I think, in here. And Dan seems to be the one who sums them up the best, so go for it.
So I think if we're talking about particularly moving the bathroom, that center area of messy complexity, the key thing is that it is a long journey, and it's treated as if it's a long journey. And people are willing to take that long journey. What is almost always present is that there is a passionate owner acting as the choreographer through many of the hard parts. Great innovations, particularly moving the bathroom innovations, are not done by committees. They're done by a passionate leader who manages all these different dimensions that we've already talked about. And I think actually cash transfer programming is one of those stories that I think is really illustrative of this. As mentioned, it makes brilliant sense, right? If you've got a functioning market, rather than bringing in bags of rice, give somebody a Visa card. It's much easier. What's untold in that story is that for the European Union to participate, there were fundamental laws that they could not donate cash directly to people, that they had to provide their aid in the forms of good and kind. And as a result, there was a passionate leader within ECHO that went and spent an 8-year journey changing all the underlying laws and regulations that governed the way ECHO did donations. As you're looking towards implementing this, the idea of delivering a Visa card makes a lot of sense. We've already heard about how that was difficult in the complex environment of the Haiti government, but also think about questions like being able to anonymize data. If you give somebody a bag of rice, that's a fairly anonymous activity. If you give somebody a Visa card, that's not an anonymous activity. And so we get into all sorts of personal privacy, personal data issues. So there are huge complex issues here that need somebody to own and drive forward. And to me, that's the biggest success. They recognize the issues, they're willing to take the long journey, and there's somebody there moving the bathroom.
Awesome. Yes, the technology is always just a part of a larger socio-technical complex system. So now we have, if we're going to give the audience about close to 10 minutes to have some dialogue with you, we've got about 10 minutes ourselves for you to sort of, what's the one thing, if a technologist came to you and said, I want to work with you, I have this idea or whatever, what's the one thing we want to leave them with? Let's take like 2 minutes each. And oh, you've got a mic. Where do I have your mic? I think I have your mic.
Okay. If I had to give a couple of advices, first of all is we need to get to know each other. And we need to you have to understand the ambiguity and the complexities of the humanitarian ecosystem. It's not straightforward. It does not operate like the private business. I'm not saying that it's more complex or less complex, it's just different, and we need to understand that. And we need also to understand what your motivations are, as much as we need to understand, you need to understand our motivations, and that is an important. I mean, the UNICEF and other colleagues, together with the Red Cross, we have other, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are working on guiding principles on humanitarian innovation. And on those, we add elements around the ethical approaches that we need to have. We're talking about property rights, personal data, but also it is important for us to, as humanitarians, we need to clarify, and that's not a criticism, but we need to clarify what is the role and motivation of the private sector into the humanitarian industry. I think that it's important. And maybe the last point is also try to also understand how the humanitarians define humanitarian innovation, and in which, you know, most of the elements have been mentioned, but think about it has to reduce vulnerability in people, it has to increase resilience on people, it has to have possibility for scaling up. These many other elements have already been mentioned, but please keep those in mind.
Awesome. Trust, relationships, empowerment, vulnerability. Okay.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I probably, if one word I could maybe try to sum up a few different points, would be accountability. So what is different about humanitarian technology, with a different ecosystem in which you would be working with new technology, say if we're thinking about the health sphere in particular, is actually any humanitarian context, you're working with vulnerable populations. You're working with people who might not be empowered to be able to give, understand what technology is being used, and also how they're interacting with it and where that data is going. So there's immediately issues to do with, consent and to do with autonomy, but also there's issues to do with, if we are going to implement a technology, where is that, from our point of view, we have a responsibility to say where is that data going and who is going to use that data and who is going to have access to that data. We don't want to go into a setting and say, right, this is a great technology, I think it's going to do, it should do a lot of, it should have a lot of benefit for the population, and then actually at the end of the day find out that unfortunately that information's got into the wrong hands and we've actually ended up doing more harm to that population than good. So I think there's really big questions here and big ethical dilemmas or risk analysis aspects that need to be considered by anyone who's implementing even what seems to be a simple technology. Anything where you are affecting a vulnerable population in a vulnerable situation, a humanitarian aid or crisis, it just has to be the forefront. It needs to be before technologies are implemented. This can't be something that say is trialed within an Ebola epidemic or within a migration crisis. There need to be some protocols, whether they're ethical innovation principles or technology principles within humanitarian crises, that need to be considered before going out into the field to implement these new technologies. I'm not saying I'm not saying it's completely a negative perspective. I just think that there's a huge amount of benefit to be gained from a lot of humanitarian technology, but these have to be at the forefront of everyone's mind, whether it's private, NGO, or governmental, dealing with humanitarian populations.
Awesome. The technology is not at the center of the innovation. Horrible thing to say to IEEE, but that's the but that is the case. Sean.
So I'm going to kind of repeat that. I'm going to just tell a quick little story. So technologists don't always get it right. By the way, neither does the aid world. And I was sitting with my friend and I was kind of moaning about, this thing goes wrong, that thing goes wrong. Finally, in frustration, my friend said, Sean, so I'm a PR marketing person. Tell me your one-word, UNICEF campaign to transform, to save development and make it better. And I was like, oh, last, I just wanted to moan, So I thought, okay, I said, okay, this is it. So this is my words of wisdom, my campaign slogan. It's not all about you. That doesn't mean it's not all about just you, technologists. It's not all about your technology. It's not all about me. It's not all about me, the humanitarian provider. It is genuinely all about them. And so when your technology doesn't work, now maybe engineers are better than us about dealing with failure, but you know what we do? We tell them, it is you. It's your fault that our technology doesn't work. You know, we get mad at people when they're not grateful. They didn't use it. They broke it. They lost it. They sat on it. If they're kids, they played with it. They ignored your technology. And you get mad and you try and hide the data or prove that you will spend great money. And we have, I have to say, a lot of evidence that we have done this as humanitarians. We spend a great deal of money proving to them that they should like what I thought was a really cool idea. But I'm sorry, it's really not all about you, or me. It's not all about us, okay? It's all about them. So I think that's, honestly, my simplest piece of advice.
So, I think, one more thing, sure.
Because I'm British, and we're terribly negative about everything. We always think about the worst things. But I live in Bangladesh, and I'm trying to live in my culture that I'm in, and they're wonderful. They're so positive about everything, and that's why they're so resilient. So I thought, okay, I've just said something really depressing. I dream of a technology jump. I think this is the coolest thing. This is why I wanted to talk to you people. Is because in these countries, all these technologies coming in, and we skipped all of that awful design testing phase, and we can jump stuff. We can bring in mobile phones, and we didn't have to bother with landlines. And I even remember that one, you know, the little turning one. So yeah, there are infrastructure issues, but the people will find a way. If you have something that they need, they'll find a way to use it, that's for sure. And I also was thinking, something I feel like you're missing here is they are now going to be the new testing ground. And there may be things that they're coming up with that you didn't know that you needed. You seem to, I heard some lot of language of as if you were going to export all your amazing new innovations that you've worked on, and that's going to be the end. I see it the other way around. They are going to now do the design testing for you, and you're going to technology jump back. So for all the people in this room who are over 40, which I have to say is really everybody, there's not very many young people here, is can I say, basically, maybe you, the US, you're the Betamax in this scenario, and they are the DVD, HD, surround sound, 3D. So the positive news is you could benefit from this as well.
IEEE GHTC, it's not all about us.
All right. So I think my basic line would be own your baby. Be the passionate owner of the thing that you create and be willing to take the long, hard journey. Mm-hmm. If you dream to innovate and if you dream to make a difference in this space, and I think we've heard ample reason to believe that that is a really important thing to do in the world, it's not going to be easy. And I guess that might discourage a lot of people, but maybe if you're not really willing to push forward, if you're not really willing to own this very difficult, complex, messy journey that involves lots of different domains, lots of different challenges, it's unlikely your innovation is going to make a difference anyways. Mm-hmm. So own the baby, become the passionate leader that deals with the big, long, hard journey, and I think you could really make a difference in the world.
Awesome. So, you know, about 5 years ago, IEEE decided it was going to have a humanitarian initiative. I think, just to wrap all this up, for those of us, you know, unlike our panel, whose home is IEEE, we who come to GHTC have a burden and a mission that relates to what Dan's just talking about, which is to explain to IEEE what it is they've taken on when they say they're going to have a humanitarian initiative. It is not business as usual for IEEE. And so that's my takeaway from this group. And you have the mission to carry that. Those of you I'm pointing to, all the IEEE members and future IEEE members out there. That's your mission here, to explain that to the Institute. So we have responsibly left about 9 minutes, give or take, for questions to the panel. This is a great opportunity. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Dan, you got to realize that you might not have the right baby. The story of humanitarian involvement is replete with stories of things that went in there, it looked good, it didn't work. A year later, 5 years later, they went in, it wasn't working. You've got to be open-minded and make sure that, in fact, you know what you want, you follow through, and you're willing to be flexible.
And here's where the baby analogy falls apart. So you can't basically say, I'm going to change my baby's hair to brown because I've realized that actually looks better with their eyes. On the other hand, the housing analogy still works. You can decide to put in a different kind of bathroom midway through the project. And this whole idea of agile development, where you learn, you adjust, you pivot, that is a key part of doing this long journey.
The pivot.
Hi. Alex Moseson with USAID's Global Development Lab and the Higher Education Solutions Network. In a few months' time, I'll be at Purdue, and the theme is higher education for me and a lot of the other people in this room who are within or work closely with universities, including at least one of our panelists. So my question is to ask you to go a little deeper into your wisdom and wishes. If you had a magic wand and could change one thing about higher education, maybe your biggest frustration or what have you, what would it be in this space?
Yeah, it did seem to be directed to you.
Within humanitarian technology, yeah. I think so. I mean, probably what I've been saying most of the conference, really trying to have, field-based sort of simulations and examples that are able to transfer into the field. So from the very start of any kind of project, whatever sphere of higher education might be in, having a needs-based assessment, population definition or community definition, discussion with community, including, if you need to, working with sociologists, anthropologists to find out whether this technology that you think might be useful is actually going to be appropriate for the population you're working with, and then subsequently having a feedback loop, so making sure that as you go forward with your design of the technology that you have some way of having accountability to the population and making sure that you can get the intervention improved if it needs to be. So yeah, probably needs assessment, community-based, and making things a bit more, even at the stage of planning, making things a bit more rigorous. So have a risk assessment, have a risk benefit analysis, not only a sort of cost benefit analysis.
Could I, Robin, I think wanted to say something on this one.
Yeah, now having been in between these two spaces for the past 5 years and having a real desire to connect these communities, one thing I think I found, because I meet a lot of academics who want to meet my connections and my networks and work in the humanitarian space, and I have humanitarians who need that research. What I find, though, is that academia really does have disincentives for that, particularly in terms of getting information out. So as academics, we work in theory, we get to think about it a while, we get to kind of perfect it and look at all the evidence. But the humanitarians are moving on a much faster timeline. And so I need so for example, when I did my research with the Red Cross, because I consider myself a humanitarian first before an academic, I did my operational report to the Red Cross first, because they wanted to know immediately, what did you learn, what did they find? They want to take it back and chew it up and use it and, and apply it to policy and things like that. And then I went back and said, okay, I'm going to publish it, I'm going to get it out there, I'm going to apply, because that has a slower timeline. And academics aren't really incentivized to do that extra work. It's really hard, and there's nothing, other than the goodness of their heart, there's nothing institutionally incentivizing them to do that. So that's what I'd say, is there needs to be some barriers lifted, some greater incentives for academics to actually get practitioners what they need out of that research as much as what they need.
Other questions?
Yeah, concerning the question of what's working, I want to refer to the case of the Apple II computer, because actually it's working wonderfully, and it's based on using a standard NTSC television, and it runs on the standard tape recorders and the floppy drive. So I think standards is something that we should have more of our attention. IEEE is a very big standards forming organization. Why don't you consider using, say, the USB power supplies when you talk about the battery packs? So if we can use it more, then maybe that's good. I just want to draw the attention to...
Could you move the mic a little away from your mouth? I think it's harder to hear.
I see. I just want to say we are technologists, and I just want to see how we can apply technology which we know best to benefit the humanitarian service, to scale up to make really having an impact. So we are sitting on the standard of a treasure of standards that we should actually capitalize on.
So, if I could try to repeat it, I think the question is, how can the technologist work with the community to scale up a technical idea? No.
Can I partially answer that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You got it? You got it.
Okay. May I partially answer that? For communications, for example, mobile phones have basically taken over the world. All of that is based on standards.
Okay, and that's not going to work. So one of the big challenges that you have with the current transition in the humanitarian sector is that you're getting more players acting in more different ways. The central actor who can establish and enforce standards are actually the roles of those organizations are declining. So rather than look towards standards, look towards interoperability models that don't rely upon standards.
I just wanted to say that your example of an Apple computer is a perfect example for me where I would disagree that in humanitarian context. I consider the Apple computer one of the most beautiful machines, and yet not at all what I would choose to give to a elderly person or a person with disabilities. It's more like joining a cult than having an open, inclusive thing. I still can't use the blasted thing properly. I'm so embarrassed. I have to find a teenager to use it. Okay, so by my standards, because I have tons of standards about inclusion, openness, accessibility for the most marginalized, Apple is an epic fail. But it's so beautiful and pretty, and I'm encouraged to buy that beautiful, pretty, epic fail. So when you say about standards, I say yes, but don't forget we have ours, and ours from our point of view might kind of undermine some of yours.
So this is a fascinating topic to bring up with 1 minute to go. No, because here's where the two communities really probably aren't meeting. Standards make an interoperability infrastructure possible. Standards that the end user couldn't give a damn about, never knows about, doesn't deal with. Without those standards, creating an enterprise architecture, creating a way that everybody can continue to work the way they want to work without having to change systems and share data without having to change the way they do their job, that's the vision. We're not there yet, but without infrastructure standards for those enterprise architectures, we're not going to get to the point where you can then have the freedom to do whatever you want to do. Does that make sense, Dan?
Yeah, and I respectfully disagree.
Okay. I figured that's why I said it's a terrible subject to bring up with 1 minute to go, because it's a very interesting discussion. Last question.
Yeah, so it seems that one of the things that's in every house now, to stay with that, is a telephone, a cellular telephone. And I was most impressed actually by the case that you described about that hotline for teenagers. Now we've also heard at this conference about work that Sylvia is doing, for example, with SMS messaging services for the homeless. And I wonder if you believe that the cell phone are we at the end of the line for applications where the phone maybe is combined with back-end systems to provide services, or where are we in the evolution of a cell phone itself and communication with the cell phone, not necessarily things you attach to the cell phone to deliver services to needing populations?
This is great because Lorenzo hasn't had his question yet.
Yeah, but I would like, I know it's 1 minute, I'm just going to give an inject, and I would like you to complement, okay? I think that we haven't even realized of the potential of mobile communication. I think that it's one of the small I would say, exception to the rule in terms of application to the innovation, to the humanitarian innovation of success, general success. Not always, but there is a potential. You know, the same thing, and I will go back to what you just said about the jump. The fact that we didn't, I mean, in less developed countries, we didn't have to go into the entire infrastructure. We directly jump into the mobile network applications. We are just in the beginning, but we have seen enormous success. I mean, UNICEF, for instance, and many others, right? I mean, our entire communication system is one of the big gadgets. It is on beneficiary communication, is the use of SMS communication system, but it's not. I think it's important perhaps just to say that I would say two things. First of all, we're just in the beginning. I think there's still a long way to go. As much as our mobile devices here in the US, I think they were just still on the learning curve in terms of potential applications. And two, they have to be combined with other points. Right? Every time that we talk to our beneficiary communication advisor in Geneva, he says, Terra, which is our application for SMS system, it's sort of the beauty, is the most exciting thing because it operates, it works. Every time that we go to a mobile network operator, they get very excited about that. They say, oh, I want to have that, right? I want to be able to respond as I don't know, take any company in the US, I mean, what we are dealing with. They have a strong interest to get into that one. But we tell them, yes, but this is not just about that. There are many other elements around beneficiary communication that we have to take into consideration.
Great, thanks. Okay, just like any really good rock concert, we're going to have an encore. One more question.
Thanks. Hey, I'm Corey Kraft from Oregon State. I work with robots. As a young researcher, a lot of what I've heard from you guys is just the benefit of the communication between the two spaces of the humanitarian organizations and the world of academia and technology. How do you go about sort of starting those initial contacts or those initial collaborations with humanitarian organizations?
Great question. Lorenzo, or?
Well, how do we start? I think it's important to say that we are in a learning curve. I mean, I personally came here today, and I mean this week, and I met with two different departments of the university, and I think there has been a little bit of lack of proactivity. That varies a lot depending on the humanitarian organizations, but more and more we are realizing of the need to work with the academia. We are very clear that the humanitarian challenge is enormous, and that we need to partner. We need to partner with private institutions, we need to partner with academia, and what we are seeing is that even the mechanism that Robin was said, perhaps are not very clear about incentives for the academia to partner with us, but more, I want to be very, very positive. I think that more and more we are seeing also the academia realizing that it's a fantastic ground to work together, and an enormous potential that is not being realized yet. So we are creating these spaces individually, I said, from a humanitarian organization to academia, but more and more we are seeing groups of academic institutions. We have, for instance, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have REDULAC, which is the network of universities that have an interest on disaster preparedness and response. So we have hundreds of different universities that are part of that, and they know how to connect with the humanitarian network industry.
Thank you. Lorenzo, Miriam, Sean, Dan, Robin, and Joe for giving us the space. Thank you very much.